case of Nicole Lobby. Nicole Lobby, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, loving wife, amazing mother, and a friend. All she was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to make sure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they got married, they had a son. Nicole is known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and then became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal is to become a fitness trainer. Nicole recently started a new job, and no one thought she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but had difficulty breathing, so the witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who gave more details about the incident. He said he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building to the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple she didn't know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Lobby, 29, a coworker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19th, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters asking for lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole gave each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she was done, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under the stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. Combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives determined the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers were involved in this intensive investigation, assisted by K-9 dogs. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a lab for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings, but said they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They have contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Lobby, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the attacker did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the murder might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions about his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They saw this man, who had similar features to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the same time the attack on Nicole took place, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives working with witnesses drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to find clues about the killer. The sketch led to several leads. A man said his son knew a man who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police found Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and seemed to have mental problems. When asked about Nicole, he did not hesitate to admit that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been in the newspaper and gave irrelevant details. As a result, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the sketch of the suspect appeared in the newspaper, the police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick looked similar to the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never done anything similar to what happened to Nicole. He had run-ins with the law before, but he had never physically harmed anyone. The police interviewed Nick and found his behavior disturbing. When asked about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence was found linking him to the crime. Nick's phone records also showed that he was not near the scene of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family is going through a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Chris Lobby shared that he can't stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He said, "The hard thing is that there are so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them." Police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their worries became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city about 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to go home. The streets were almost deserted. As she left the bar, she tried to call a taxi but realized her phone was dead. So she decided to walk closer to the stadium to catch one more easily. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. As she crossed the street and turned around, she saw the man behind her was still following her. She walked faster but was suddenly hit in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself face to face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She said she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather described that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, Heather realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker thought he had achieved his goal, he ran away. Despite the brutal beating, Heather found the strength to stand up and go out into the street. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At this time, neither of them knew that the attacker had been arrested at the police station. There was a park near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night saw a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were bloody. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to take him to the station. Jamie Tinoco, 17, was young but had been noticed by the police many times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jamie had been using drugs since he was 12, and his parents had no control over him. Jamie had dropped out of high school since his freshman year and was arrested for driving without a license the day before the attack on Heather, but was released shortly after. During questioning, Jamie confessed to attacking Heather. The man was completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Lobby's death saw a photo of Jamie released by Eugene Police. They believed Jamie matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jamie lived with his parents in Portland and that their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled their suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Lobby's death. Detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole's case, hoping that he would admit to assaulting her as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jamie insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer questions. Police needed to find evidence to link him to Nicole Lobby's death. As mentioned earlier, Jamie lived across the street from his parents at Timber Creek Apartments. As a result, the police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They found a black hoodie and orange pants in Jamie's room and sent them to a lab for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, with no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jamie's belongings, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. While there is no evidence to prove that Jamie killed Nicole, there is enough evidence to link him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and said he had no remorse for his actions. Jamie had broken away from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Autzen Stadium. Heather said she still has nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth after the attack. She has had to find a new job. The injuries she suffered in the attack, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery to recover. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened, she said in Lane County District Court. I pray that Jamie will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine. Heather Miller held hands with 2 family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jamie grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the attack she endured. When the judge asked why Jamie was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge called Jamie's lack of remorse appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said his behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and the judge's sentence was fully deserved. A courageous mother of 2, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jamie would never have the opportunity to harm another person. She did not want him to think he had won and brought her down, so she kept her composure from the start. Although the defense tried to portray Jamie as a young man who had been affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jamie's lawyer asked the judge to sentence his client to 8 years and 4 months in prison, arguing that Jamie was remorseful for what he had done. However, Jamie did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak. He refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Voigt sentenced Jamie to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the harsh sentence. The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this, she said. As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I can't. When Jamie becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As for Heather, her family said she is looking forward to starting a new job and being able to move on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to take advantage of Jamie's ego to get him to confess. They questioned him about Nicole Lobby's death. The detectives told him that he would get more respect in prison if the other inmates knew that he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind but also the one who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jamie began talking about Nicole, saying that he didn't mean to kill her. He wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but he didn't mean to kill Nicole, just hurt her. He said that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and bring a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, he hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she turned around. Jamie said he chose Nicole because he thought she would be an easy target. When asked if he would try to force Nicole to have sex like he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." Jamie said he didn't do it because Nicole screamed when she stabbed him, so he ran away during the reenactment. Jamie showed investigators how he escaped the scene. Chris Lobby said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Jamie has pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Jamie and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, a psychologist at Oregon State Hospital determined that Jamie had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of Jamie's guilt. During his reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Lobby's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had 2 options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 30 years. As a result, in 2017, Jamie Tinoco was found guilty on all counts. Jamie, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his 2 attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked him if he had anything to say before she formally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Jamie said before sitting down. Chris Lobby, Nicole's husband, said Jamie's family came to see his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. But that's not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Jamie's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law has changed since Tinoco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to decide whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Jamie's attorneys could ask for a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Lobby's family, who were not expecting it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they will have to go through another emotional ordeal. Jamie remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Lobby's case. Case of Cat West. Cat West was born on February 15, 1975, in the small town of Davie, Florida. She was the only child of Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Cat always wanted a sibling, but her mother's health problems made that impossible. This has made Cat West so attached to her dolls. She treats them like living creatures, sings to them, and cherishes them. Cat West was a popular student in school, admired for her good looks and friendly personality. She was very active in extracurricular activities, particularly sports and dance. However, during the teenage years, signs of bipolar affective disorder begin to appear, characterized by depression and anxiety, alternating with periods of hyperactivity, persistently elevated mood and agitation. Only later did her parents realize their daughter's condition, but it was too late. By then, she had turned to alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she sought treatment for her addiction that doctors discovered the underlying issue, a bipolar disorder. Despite overcoming her dependency on alcohol, managing her bipolar disorder proved to be a much more daunting task. She was on multiple medications, which caused unpleasant side effects and made her feel unwell. Eventually, the disorder was brought under control, but Cat West had to continue taking medication. Cat West wants to get married and have children, but her personal life is full of hardship, possibly due to her past mental illness and addiction. However, Cat West is a charismatic and attractive person, has many admirers, is often the life of the party, and shines in the spotlight. Growing up, Cat West aspired to be a model. She actively pursued her goal, spending time attending auditions and exploring different looks. She was especially attracted to Marilyn Monroe, an actress of the style of the 1950s. Cat West has watched many of Monroe's films, collected her posters, and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Cat West bore a resemblance to her idol, which she proudly acknowledged and cherished. Although her dream of becoming a famous model didn't come true, Cat West's photos were frequently published in local magazines, earning her some recognition, a fan base, and occasional recognition on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she met her life partner, William Jeffrey West. William was born in 1970 in Alabama, came from a typical family. From a young age, he had aspirations of a career in the military or law enforcement. As a diligent student and active sports enthusiast, he was robust, fit, and incredibly focused. In the early 1990s, William joined the U.S. military, initially serving as a military police officer. His dedication led to a promotion as a military recruiter responsible for enlisting individuals into the Army and Navy. He was eventually promoted to head of a recruiting unit, spending 20 years of his life in military service. William pursued higher education alongside his military career, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina. He then went on to study criminal justice, eventually earning a master's degree. William is a calm and goal-oriented person who likes to keep a low profile. He was a devoted family man, marrying young and having 2 children. After retiring from the military, he became a corporal in the police department of a university town, where he was responsible for ensuring the safety of the campus community. He approached his duties with seriousness and responsibility, never having to use his service firearm throughout his career. Cat West and William first met in the mid-2000s, when William was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their vastly different personalities, William is a quiet and serious military man, and Cat West is a bubbly and outgoing blonde, and they feel an immediate attraction to each other. In 2004, William, a married man at the time, met Cat West. Despite their 5-year age gap and Cat West struggles with alcohol addiction, but they quickly fell in love. William soon filed for divorce to be with Cat West, and in less than 5 months, they got married in Las Vegas in 2005. After getting married, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lola. They moved to Sarah, Alabama, William's home state, where Cat designed their custom-built home, adorning their bedroom with portraits of her idol Marilyn Monroe. Neighbors described the Williams as a happy couple, despite their very different personalities. Cat West was known for her bold fashion sense, always striving to look stunning and attractive. She loved being the center of attention, often seeking compliments and admiring glances. In contrast, William appeared more reserved and serious, a trait likely developed during his long military career. Kat West's life is a complete contrast to her glamorous appearance and her everyday reality as a housewife. Despite her efforts to make it big in modeling, her career failed to take off after her marriage and the birth of her daughter. Focusing on creating a cozy home and raising her children became her top priorities. However, her domestic life wasn't fulfilling and she yearned for attention and recognition. With the emergence of social media in the late 2000s, she began sharing pictures online. She was inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe, but gradually became more daring and provocative. Her husband was surprisingly supportive of her new hobby, often serving as her photographer. Eventually, the hobby became a profitable business, earning her income through paid subscriptions. A typical evening found they shopping for prepared seafood, fine brandy, and absinthe from a local supermarket. They would pick out scented candles from a nearby store to set the mood for a romantic evening. Surveillance cameras caught them seemingly carefree and happy as they made their purchases, unaware of the tragedy that was about to happen. After a fun dinner and a few drinks, Kat West began transforming into her online persona, Kitty Cat. She asked Williams to take some intimate photos of her, first in lingerie and then without clothes. Williams agreed and took several revealing shots, which were later posted on Kat West's private online profile, accessible only to her fans. A romantic evening that seemed to end in a night of passion instead led to a tragic ending. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Williams was on her way to work. Although the sun had not yet risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Williams house. At first, she didn't realize what it was, but as she slowed down, she saw a nearly naked woman lying motionless on the road. She also thought she saw someone standing on the doorstep of the house, but they quickly disappeared into the shadows when they noticed her approaching. During questioning, the neighbor was unable to definitively state whether she saw Kat West's attacker enter the house or flee down the street. The neighbor, who was shocked and unsure of what to do, hesitated to approach the body. After returning home, she informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report the distressing discovery. At the operator's request, the neighbor reluctantly approached the body while waiting for help to arrive. She identified the body as Kat West and checked for a pulse, but unfortunately, there was none. Kat West's body was cold and stiff. Kat West was found lying face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a bright pink bra top. There was a pool of blood under her head. Nearby was a bottle of wormwood wine with some of the wine spilled on the road and blood stains on the bottle. A short distance away lay her smashed smartphone. Due to the quiet residential area, there were no other witnesses to the incident, which remains shrouded in mystery. Kat West's car was last seen around 8:30 p.m., and the time her body was discovered at 5 a.m. A key figure who may be able to shed some light on the events is Kat West's husband, Mr. Williams. The investigation is ongoing, with Detective Michael Melhoff being one of the first to arrive at the scene. When the detective arrived at the house where Kat West's body was found, Williams answered the door. He seemed anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When asked about his wife's whereabouts, Williams said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then told him that a woman's body, identified by neighbors as Kat West, had been found near the house. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective outside, where he confirmed that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't show any extreme emotions, such as crying or screaming, which raised some suspicions. When questioned about his whereabouts and activities during the night, he said he had slept soundly because they had been drinking the previous evening. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also shared some information about his wife's medical history. He said she had bipolar disorder and took medication for it. He also mentioned that she struggled with alcohol and sometimes behaved erratically when she was drunk. He noted that she would occasionally jump on their backyard trampoline, but sometimes missed it and injured herself. A search of the house did not turn up any signs of a struggle or violence. However, some items in the kitchen suggested a recent gathering. 2 plates with leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle were on the kitchen table. Under the table, police found Kat West's high heels and a pair of panties the same color as her bra lying on the floor. However, some bloody napkins in the trash and an open bottle of detergent raised suspicions. Williams claimed that on the evening in question, Cat West had been drinking heavily, which he disliked. After a photo session, he wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He took a short shower and returned to find Cat West still sitting at the table, drinking absinthe straight from the bottle and texting someone on her phone. Williams was angry that she ignored his requests to put away her phone, and he tried to take it from her. A minor scuffle ensued, during which he accidentally elbowed Cat West's face, causing her nose to bleed. Williams explained that the blood on the discarded napkins could have been the blood from his wife's nose that night. He stated that he took the phone from his wife and threw it out the door, believing his wife would calm down and join him in bed. He claimed to have been unaware of what happened next until the police arrived at his door asking about Cat West. Williams speculated that his wife might have gone outside to retrieve her phone and brought the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. He suggested two possible scenarios. One, that she fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and froze to death, or two, that someone attacked her. However, he could not explain why his wife went out wearing only a bra without any clothes. He attributed this behavior to her being intoxicated from the absinthe. Williams's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and lack of detail, which he attributed to intoxication. However, the investigation was hampered by lack of evidence and no witnesses. The autopsy revealed that the 42-year-old woman died from a severe head injury likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, combined with hypothermia. Her blood alcohol level was extremely high, suggesting severe intoxication can impair breathing and increase the risk of loss of consciousness. Initially, it seemed that the circumstances of Cat West's death were straightforward. She had been heavily intoxicated, gone outside to search for her phone, and taken the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. It appeared that she might have lost her balance while reaching for her phone, fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and ultimately died from the injury and exposure. The presence of the blood-stained bottle near her head and the phone nearby seemed to support this scenario. Yet, the investigation discovered that this explanation was overly simplistic and potentially staged. Experts determined that the head injury was caused by the bottle found next to the body. However, forensic analysis revealed that if the victim had fallen by herself, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head rather than remaining parallel to it. The bottle was found to have both Cat West's and her husband Williams's fingerprints on it, as well as some unidentified smudged prints. Further investigation led to a different conclusion. The theory presented in court suggested that Cat West and Williams had an argument. In a fit of anger, Williams allegedly struck her with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to stage an accidental fall and cleaned up the blood in the house, but failed to dispose of all the evidence. Evidence supporting this theory included a fitness app on Williams' phone, which tracked his movements. The app showed that Williams was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived. This contradicted his claim of being asleep, leading police to speculate that he was trying to conceal evidence during these times. A neighbor who discovered the body recalled seeing a male silhouette on the doorstep of the house in the early morning hours. However, due to the dim light, she couldn't be certain if it was Williams or someone else. She also couldn't determine if the person entered the house. This information piqued the investigators' interest, especially given Cat West's online persona, Kitty Cat, which had attracted many male admirers who paid to see her revealing photos. This theory suggests that a highly devoted fan may have been responsible. As a homemaker, Cat West often received messages from various men, including some with inappropriate proposals. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment found in their communications. A few persistent fans who lived in other states were quickly ruled out as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep, which didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn and their origin remained unknown. Friends, relatives, and neighbors described the Williams family as a happy couple, and he knew her online activities under the name Kitty Cat. While some might have seen it as unusual, he treated it as harmless fun. Their social circle was unaware of Cat West's online persona, just as most of her followers didn't know her real-life identity. Williams firmly denied ever abusing his wife, saying he loved her so much that harming her was impossible. However, they frequently argued, and a text exchange from January 12th revealed a heated dispute. Cat West criticized Williams for not matching her energy and temperament, suggesting they might be incompatible. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Williams remained the prime suspect. Following his arrest, his family and defense attorneys rallied to his defense, believing he was innocent. They insisted that he could never hurt his wife, After his arrest, Williams was unable to afford the $500,000 bail and had to stay in custody until his trial, which took almost 3 years. He was offered a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he refused, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, drew significant media attention. This publicity put pressure on the judges and jurors. By this time, the possibility of a third party's involvement in Cat West's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence indicated that Williams was responsible for his wife Cat West's death. They believed that, fueled by jealousy and intoxicated, he hit her with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In an attempt to cover his tracks, they suggested he staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. In contrast, Williams' defense team claimed that Cat West's death was an accident. They pointed out that her extremely high blood alcohol levels would have impaired her balance and coordination. Cat West's mother testified in support of Williams, describing her daughter as eccentric but stressing that Williams loved her unconditionally and would never harm her. She also appealed to the court to consider the well-being of their child, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father. On January 11, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter. As a result, Williams received the maximum sentence of 13 years in prison, taking into account the time he had already served. Notably, if he had accepted the initial plea deal offered to him, he may have already been a free man by now. Unfortunately, all of Williams's appeals, led by his lawyers, have been unsuccessful thus far. In 2018, Sarah Ashley Hill, a mother of 2 who was 33 years old, was employed as a waiter at a neighborhood diner in Patrick County, Virginia. She was well known for her kind disposition, upbeat smile, and passion for dancing and music. She was very close to a sister, April, who frequently assisted her with her kids. Out of her 5 siblings, Sarah was the only one with the attractive red hair and vivid blue eyes. She used to get teased and told she was adopted by her siblings. Sarah was visiting her friends in North Carolina in June of 2018. She called April on her cell phone at 1:30 a.m. on June 6th, informing her that she was on Blue Hollow Road, close to Mount Airy, and that she would need a ride. Sarah did not give an explanation for her early morning walk. April was unable to simply leave her job, which was nearly an hour away. At Elkins Hugh Chatham Memorial Hospital, April worked as a registered nurse. Sarah Hill had vanished from view by the time the family got to Mount Airy. They assumed she had found another ride, or perhaps she had managed to get into her own vehicle, a white 2000 Ford Taurus. When April texted Sarah the following day to check on her and to ask if she still needed a ride, April received no response. When April called back, it went to voicemail. Sarah's phone had been switched off for 2 weeks. It was highly unusual for Sarah to be disconnected from everyone for so long. April claims that they spoke at least once a week, if not more frequently. April mentioned that Sarah had a lot of dubious friends and was dependent on illegal substances. April pondered whether it had anything to do with her sister going missing. Sarah was officially declared missing 1 month after her last sighting. Investigators began looking into her disappearance right away. Her white Ford Taurus was soon sighted at a shop close to the intersection of Blue Hollow Road and North Carolina 89. It was captured on camera footage that the store owner obtained while attempting to apprehend shoplifters. Sarah was, however, not named among the people suspected of misconduct there. Upon searching the vehicle, the police discovered Sarah's handbag, phone keys, and a few personal belongings inside. Nevertheless, no DNA fingerprints or other identifying marks that may have connected someone to her disappearance were discovered. The police thought of every scenario in which Sarah might have vanished. They looked into any enemies or issues she might have had with anyone who could have hurt her. They looked to see if she was burdened with debt or other financial issues that might have caused her to elope. Investigators also investigated whether she had a history of substance abuse or mental illness, which could have influenced her behavior or judgment. They looked into any romantic relationships or domestic conflicts she may have had that could have resulted in aggression or jealousy. They did not, however, discover any proof to back up any of these theories. 3 separate properties on King Park Circle in Mount Airy, North Carolina, were among the many locations the Surry County Sheriff's Office checked during the investigation that began in January 2019. After following Sarah's last known movements, detectives surmised that she was in the neighboring Stokes County, where she had been hanging out with a man. This person of interest displayed suspicious behavior, including restricting entry into his residence. It was found that the man had faced assault charges in the past. The Asbury Road property in Stokes County, North Carolina, where Sarah was last seen at the time of her disappearance, was shown to detectives in 2022. The Surry County Sheriff's Office, the Stokes County Sheriff's Office, and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation carried out the execution of a search warrant for the property located at 1791 Asbury Road, Westfield, North Carolina on Monday, October 17, 2022. Investigators brought in specialist personnel to use heavy machinery to stabilize an existing structure and move dirt and terrain. Beneath the floorboards were human remains. Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center received the remains. After an autopsy on October 20, 2022, it was determined that Sarah Ashley Hill's remains were what was found. The Stokes County Sheriff's Office announced on October 11, 2023, that Leroy Hoover had been detained and charged with killing Sarah. Hoover is presently awaiting trial while being held without bond in the Stokes County Jail. In Stokes County, he is also involved in other cases. We can only imagine how difficult this has been for the family of Miss Hill, Sheriff Joey Lemons remarked. The detectives working on this case from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, the Patrick County Sheriff's Office, the Surry County Sheriff's Office, and the Stokes County Sheriff's Office did an amazing job and never gave up. While nothing can truly bring a loved one back, we can only hope that this gives Miss Hill's family some sense of closure. The case of Chad Insell. Chad was born and raised in Bismarck. He attended university, majoring in mechanical engineering and design. Upon graduation, he returned to Bismarck and began working as an engineer at a local company. Friends and acquaintances describe him as a simple and kind man. In addition to his engineering work, Chad is a coach for a youth baseball team. On weekends, he spends time coaching young athletes and playing sports. He always remains calm and is not someone who likes to cause trouble. His cheerful personality does not seem like someone who is suffering from mental problems or who is thinking about quitting life. On April 6, 2015, Chad shared on social media that he was dating a woman named Nikki, who is 3 years older than he is. Friends noted that he seemed very happy at that time. A year later, in 2016, they got married. Nikki had 2 teenage sons from a previous relationship and worked in transportation for a food company. She was confident and often posted selfies on her social media with only a couple of photos featuring her sons. She has an erratic temperament and often expresses her frustration with store employees. This causes a lot of conflict, causing many people to choose to avoid communicating with her. In addition to her main job at a food company, Nikki also runs a small business that specializes in catering for events and celebrations, particularly in making sweets and baked goods. She has been successful in this field with many appealing creations showcased on her social media pages. On the outside, she and Chad appear to be a successful couple. He works at a large company in a managerial position while she balances her job at the food company with running her own business. They raised 2 children together and everything seemed to be going smoothly until January 2, 2020, when Nikki had to call emergency services. At approximately 5:30 p.m. on January 2, 2020, 911 emergency services received a call. The incident took place 15 minutes from Bismarck, North Dakota at a farmhouse surrounded by cornfields. The caller's name was Nikki. She said she had been unable to contact her husband Chad for several days and decided to visit him. However, when she arrived, she could not enter the house because it was filled with smoke. She couldn't see what was happening inside but believed her husband was there. Emergency responders, including paramedics, firefighters, and police officers quickly arrived to help. Upon investigation, they discovered that the fire had started in the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, where Chad was thought to be. Firefighters swiftly extinguished the flames and later found the charred body of a man lying on the bedroom floor. He was completely naked and had some sort of weapon placed on the bed, but away from his reach. This suggests that someone moved the weapon there, as it was not possible for him to have injured himself and then moved the weapon on his own. Police quickly determined that Chad had inflicted the injuries on himself. However, the lack of burns from a weapon suggested that the injury was likely caused by a distant impact. It could have been caused by a gas heater, which is known to be a dangerous source of heat that can cause fires, despite the risks. Gas heating systems remain popular in the United States due to their affordability and convenience. When the police arrived at the basement, they found another source of ignition, a badly burned stove on the lower level. The stove may have overheated during use and become the starting point for the fire. The entire situation was riddled with inconsistencies. The crime scene looked like a poorly staged incident. The strange points in this case are becoming more and more clear. Chad and Nikki live together and raise their children together. So why is she away from home for many days? This caught the attention of the police, who began questioning people close to the family. Chad's friends and co-workers said they had not seen him for days. This was strange because he was a department head and did not usually miss work. Chad was very responsible, so it was unusual for him to miss work. At the very least, he would have called his supervisor to let them know he could not come in. Concerns grew. Chad was last seen on December 30th, 2019, when he was captured on surveillance cameras at a local bowling alley. The next day, he did not show up for work. His wife, Nikki, called the company to inform them that her husband was seriously ill and needed a few days to recover. January 1st was a holiday, but on Monday, everyone at the company expected him to return. Yet he did not appear. Co-workers decided to call Chad to check on him. However, they were unable to reach him, prompting them to call the police to report the situation. They subsequently requested a welfare check on him. At approximately 1:20 p.m. on January 2nd, 2020, the police arrived at Chad's home. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. After waiting for a while and looking through the windows, they saw nothing unusual. The house was quiet. They did not conduct a thorough search or enter the home, believing they did not have the authority to do so. They assumed he had gone out to celebrate the holidays. They reported back to Chad's company that he was not home and that they could not assist further. They then left. Chad's co-workers suspected something was wrong, so they contacted his wife, Nikki. She stated that she was at work, but promised to check on him as soon as she got off. At 5:30 p.m., she called 911 and reported that she could not enter the house due to a strong smell of smoke, particularly in the room where Chad's body was found. Forensic scientists uncovered clear signs of arson. A mattress had been burned, possibly by a nearby gas heater. There were cigarette butts and empty whiskey bottles on the floor. However, the police were particularly puzzled as to why Nikki and the children were not home under the circumstances. Why had she and Chad not seen each other for several days? Detectives invited Nikki in for questioning to gather more information about the case. She was deeply affected by her husband's death and expressed her distress, mentioning that he often smoked inside their home, which she suggested might have caused the fire. Her testimony made investigators suspicious. They believed that her husband's death was not an accident, but a deliberate murder. So they continued to question her. Nikki then explained why she had been absent from home, stating that the stove had broken down and she had to temporarily stay in a hotel because she couldn't stand the cold. However, the strange thing was that the children were not with her or Chad, but living with her mother. During her account of the events, she unexpectedly mentioned that she had to move the children because Chad, her husband, was a cruel alcoholic. She had never mentioned anything negative about him before, only positive things. However, she now stated that both she and the children had been abused by him. She had many photos showing the bruises and injuries her husband had caused. She admitted to the police that she and her children had moved away to escape her abusive husband. Nikki found a job in a new place and was preparing to move in a week. However, her plans changed drastically with the death of her husband. Now that she had no need or reason to run away, she decided to stay. At that time, the investigators had no evidence against Nikki, so they released her, but continued to treat her as a suspect. The next day, the autopsy results came back. Forensic experts discovered that Chad had suffered severe facial injuries from a weapon, and the entire front half of his body had been burned. He was lying on his back when the fire broke out, which resulted in less burn damage to his back, where experts found bullet marks. Obviously, he couldn't have injured himself in the back with that bullet, and if he had intended to end his life, there would have been much simpler ways. The cause of death was determined to be injuries from a weapon, and Chad had died before the fire broke out. There was no soot in his airways, and the forensic expert concluded he had been dead for several days, meaning he could not have ignited the fire. It was clearly not his doing. Someone murdered him and tried to make it look like he took his end life. With these details, Nikki became the prime suspect. Nikki contacted her insurance company to claim compensation for the damage to her property after the fire. Investigators discovered that just days before the fire, on December 26th, the family had registered their home with the insurance company. Less than a week later, the house burned down under suspicious circumstances. Furthermore, during the police investigation of the crime scene, they discovered a package in the kitchen addressed to a man named Earl Howard. This new suspect needed to be investigated, and he was found quickly. In her initial interrogation, Nikki claimed she had rented a hotel room. However, it was later revealed that the room was registered to Earl Howard, the man named on the package. He was an ordinary working man who spent most of his free time at home. Originally from Canada, he had moved to Bismarck, North Dakota, USA, for a job opportunity. Soon after, Nikki was taken back to the police station for questioning again. The detectives began asking her leading questions about Earl. Initially, she denied knowing him, but then she unexpectedly admitted to having a relationship with him. She claimed that they had been having an affair for a year, that Chad knew about it and accepted the situation. She then maintained a relationship with Earl. During this time, her alcohol consumption increased, and she faced frequent insults from Chad. Throughout the interrogation, portrayed herself as a victim. She cried often, but sometimes spoke so softly that the police had to ask her to raise her voice. Experienced detectives suspected she was being insincere and was merely trying to evoke sympathy. After being pressured, her attitude changed, and she stopped crying. She realized that tears could not convince the detectives. So after being advised, she continued to tell the story clearly. Nikki finally provided details about the incident that led to Chad's death on the evening of December 30th. That evening, he went to his favorite bowling alley and played for a few hours, then went home. At that time, Nikki was at a hotel with her lover, Earl. She planned to return home later that evening to gather her belongings before their trip to Texas. When she got to their house, she found Chad drunk and he started abusing her again. He physically attacked her and she stated that during such moments, she would simply leave. However, Nikki then shifted the conversation to more abstract topics. She expressed frustration about Chad's drinking and gambling losses. The investigator had to press her again to continue answering questions. Unexpectedly, she revealed that she had returned home that night not alone, but with her lover, Earl. Chad was clearly upset by this and started yelling at her, prompting her to leave the house. Nikki claimed to have heard a heated argument and a struggle between Earl and Chad, followed by a bang. However, she did not ask Earl what happened. According to Nikki, they simply got into the car and drove away in silence. At this point, Nikki wrote a confession and placed it on the table. Then she decided to tear the paper. However, the detective quickly grabbed the confession from her hands. This action further aroused suspicion, leading the police to conclude that Nikki was involved in the death of her husband, Chad. Furthermore, while investigating the crime scene at Chad's home, detectives found a surveillance camera. They retrieved the video footage, which revealed crucial information. Earl and Nikki arrived at the house around 10 p.m. on December 30th, approximately half an hour before Chad left the bowling alley. They went inside and spent about 20 minutes in the house before coming out with several boxes. This was important evidence as it indicated that Nikki was at the crime scene before Chad's return. Detectives theorized that she was potentially removing her possessions to protect them from a planned fire, which enabled them to charge her with premeditated involvement. It was important to fully restore the evidence, as the circumstantial evidence alone could seem unconvincing to the jury. After this, Chad returned home around 10:30 p.m., seemingly unaware that Nikki and Earl had been at their house just before 1 a.m. Nikki and Earl returned to the house. They went inside, and shortly after, nearly all the security cameras stopped recording. Only one camera, which monitored the driveway, continued to operate. This limited footage did not capture everything that occurred afterward. They eventually left the house and drove away. Cigarettes found inside matched those smoked by Earl, but none were fully smoked. They appeared to have been lit and then carelessly discarded on the furniture and floor, creating a fire hazard. This suggested a deliberate setup. Moreover, it was revealed that Nikki was the sole beneficiary of the house insurance policy, valued at $1.26000. She was arrested on January 7th for conspiracy to commit murder. Although her bail was set at $1.500,000, she could not afford it and remained in jail. Additionally, Nikki had 3 previous convictions for fraud and was on house arrest at the time of her arrest. Investigators went to Earl's house to arrest him and take his statement, but he fled. However, he was not able to evade justice for long. 2 days later, he was arrested in Michigan near the Canadian border. He was trying to escape to his home country to avoid prosecution in the United States. When arrested, he did not resist. After the arrest, police gathered more information from him, which helped clarify the incident of that night. Nikki and Earl had more motives for committing the crime than just collecting an insurance payout on the house. Their relationship lasted for over a year. At one point, She shared with Earl that Chad had $1,600 life insurance policy. They believed that this money could solve their problems and allow them to live comfortably. She wanted to avoid the complications of divorce and the division of assets, so she chose a darker and more lucrative option. They planned to kill Chad and make it appear that he took his end life. Their goal was to collect all the insurance money they could, both life and property, and then run away to Texas together. On December 9th, they finalized their plan and set it into motion. To prevent her children from witnessing the crime, Nikki sent them to stay with their grandmother. Knowing that Chad was going bowling that night, Nikki went to their home early to gather belongings she wanted to save from a fire. CCTV footage from the hotel captured her and Earl bringing their items to their room. Later, they returned to the scene of the crime, where Nikki disabled the cameras and the security system. Earl was armed, but it is unclear who actually killed Chad as they blamed each other. Apparently, the murder happened while Chad was sleeping. He was attacked in the back. He died instantly. Then his body was turned upside down and his face was attacked to make it appear that he had injured himself. Earl and Nikki thought that burning the house down would destroy all evidence, making it difficult for forensics to find any clues. They then scattered whiskey bottles around the house to portray Chad as a heavy drinker. Finally, they put a gas heater in the room, lit it, and left, expecting it to cause a fire. The following day, they anxiously awaited news of the incident, but nothing came. Frustrated, they returned to the house and discovered some small, weak fires that had already gone out. To ensure a more effective blaze, they rearranged the mattress and other items to facilitate burning. Earl went down to the basement and started a fire directly above the stove. Meanwhile, Nikki scattered cigarettes around the room, believing their plan would succeed. They left, but for the next 2 days, there was no news about the fire. Fearing their plan had failed, they returned to the scene. On January 2nd at 5 p.m., when Nikki opened the door, a backdraft caused the fire to flare up. However, their plan failed, as the house did not burn down as they expected. During the investigation, detectives discovered fingerprints and DNA evidence from both Nikki and Earl. The poor staging of the scene was quickly discovered. Even the placement of the weapon on the bed suggested an attempt to mislead the investigation. If Chad injured himself, the weapon wouldn't be placed that way. This detail became a key argument for the prosecution at trial and was persuasive to the jury. Nikki and Earl were charged with murder. At the last minute, Earl agreed to a plea bargain, which allowed the prosecution to learn all the details of the crime. Earl Howard pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit arson and tampering with evidence. As a result, he received a 25-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after serving 21 years. During the trial, he and Nikki blamed each other. Earl's plea deal included testifying against Nikki. In contrast, she maintained her innocence, claiming she was outside when the shooting occurred and that Earl was the shooter. She also accused Earl of lighting fires and throwing away cigarettes. During a subsequent interrogation, Nikki told bizarre stories, claiming that Chad was aware of her affair and had allowed her to meet Earl. She also stated that Earl and her husband were friends. Nikki described her husband as an alcoholic, but those close to the family disagreed, stating that Chad did not drink heavily, did not abuse Nikki, and would not permit her to be with Earl. Chad never made anyone doubt his character. No one had ever seen him drunk, and he always prioritized his family career. Therefore, no one believed that he was a bad husband. They thought Nikki had fabricated the stories right away. On February 17, 2023, Nikki Ansel was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and attempting to cover up the crime. On March 16, 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years, plus an additional 15 years for arson. The sentence was controversial, as Nikki's punishment was harsher than Earl's, despite evidence that he played a key role in the crime. The disparity in sentencing was attributed to Earl admitting guilt and cooperating with the investigation, while Nikki did not. However, the court's decision was final, allowing her to file her first appeal as early as 2026. Case of Connie Alm. Connie Alm was born on July 18, 1974, in Malaysia. She was the younger of 2 daughters and enjoyed a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Connie moved to the United States to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. While living in the United States, Connie met a man named Brandon. He was a U.S. and an ethnic Chinese whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Initially, and Brandon were just friends. but their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a significant figure in Kanye's life, supporting and helping her in various ways. They got married in 2001. Kanye's life was on track in 2003. She was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning a future with her husband, and hoping to start a family. Her life changed dramatically that year. The trouble began when Kanye's father, Ong Bayong, was diagnosed with cancer. Kanye decided to fly to Malaysia to support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Kanye and her husband, Brandon, arrived in Malaysia. However, Brandon returned to the USA after a few days, leaving Kanye to care for her father in Kuala Lumpur. Despite the distance, Kanye and Brandon stayed close through daily phone calls. They would talk for hours, sharing stories about their daily lives, including their two pets. Kanye's father underwent surgery to remove a kidney, but fortunately, his health began to recover. As he improved, Kanye planned her return to the USA, scheduling a flight for June 14, 2003. Kanye organized a farewell dinner at a local restaurant the evening before her departure, and she invited her mother, sister, and closest friends to join her. That evening, June 13, 2003, Kanye and her mother arrived at the designated meeting spot later than the others. They had trouble finding a parking spot in front of the mall, so Kanye parked in the underground lot. However, her mother was concerned about the poor lighting in the lot rather than the parking fee. Once they arrived at the second-floor restaurant, Kanye was excited to reunite with her childhood friends whom she hadn't seen in a long time. They spent a few hours catching up, but Kanye soon noticed that her mother, Pearlie, was starting to look tired. When Kanye asked if her mother wanted to head home, Pearlie said she had a lot to do that day, was okay with leaving early, and promised her friends she would be back soon. Kanye, her mother, and her sister Elsie got up from the table to pay for their parking. They went to the payment terminal, which was located on the first floor, a floor above the underground parking lot. As they waited in line for the terminal, Kanye realized she had left the parking ticket in their car. She asked her sister and mother to stay in line while she went back down to retrieve the ticket. Elsie and Polly waited for 10 more minutes, but Kenny still hadn't returned. Then her sister started calling her. The first call went unanswered, and the second one was sent to voicemail. This was unusual, and Elsie and Polly immediately sensed that something was wrong. They quickly went to the parking lot, where they were shocked to find that Kenny's car was no longer there. They searched the parking lot several times to make sure, and after confirming that the car was indeed gone, they realized that Kanye must have disappeared along with it. Polly was certain that something had happened to her daughter, as Kanye would never leave without saying anything. Although the parking lot was poorly lit, it had surveillance cameras that might provide some clues about what had happened. The mall security initially refused to show Kanye's relatives the footage, but relented after her mother begged for their help. At midnight, Pearlie and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the shocking footage, which confirmed their worst fears. The footage revealed Kenny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot, crashing through the barrier. Although the footage quality was poor, it was evident that a man was driving with Kenny in the passenger seat. Her body was positioned as if she was trying to distance herself from the driver, leaning against the door. Upon seeing the footage, Pearlie immediately filed the disappearance and kidnapping report at a police station. The police launched an investigation, while Kanye's family and friends drove around Kuala Lumpur, desperately searching for her purple proton tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Kanye's husband, began to feel a sense of unease. He tried calling his wife multiple times, but she didn't answer. He then contacted her mother, who informed him about the events that had transpired. The news of Kanye's disappearance left Brandon in shock. Pearlie could hear him sobbing over the phone. As dawn broke, Kanye's friends and family reluctantly returned home, their search efforts having yielded no results. The police disseminated information about the disappearance and conducted their own search, but unfortunately, it didn't lead to any breakthroughs. Even the footage from the mall's parking lot, where Kanye was kidnapped, failed to provide any leads on identifying the driver of the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Kanye's loved ones last saw her. Authorities believe that if she was kidnapped, it wasn't for ransom. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have demanded it by now. A disturbing find was made by police when they discovered Kanye's car left empty on a city street. The front right tire was severely damaged, indicating it had been driven on while flat for some time, causing it to shred. In the back of the car, a large red stain was found on the passenger seat. Forensic experts collected evidence, including scrapings from the back seat, fingerprints from the steering wheel and other parts of the car. There were many clues found in the vehicle. Connie's family and friends held on to hope and prayed for her safe return. However, their hopes were crushed the next day after her car was found. On June 17th, a road worker detected a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near the highway. Upon lifting the lid, he discovered a body that someone had attempted to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived at the scene. They found 2 car tires filled with concrete which had been used as stands for road signs lying on top of the body. It appeared that whoever had hidden the body trying to make it harder to identify. Although the discovery of the body seemed to confirm the family's worst fears, Kenny's mother, Pearlie, refused to believe that her daughter was dead without official confirmation. "Until they confirm it, we will continue to hope that she will turn up alive," she said. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor said that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body yet. Connie's family members provided DNA samples for comparative analysis. Unfortunately, the results confirmed their worst nightmare. The body was indeed that of their daughter, Connie. Some sources claim that before the DNA test results, Connie's family identified the jewelry on the body. However, as a loving mother, Crowley held onto the hope that her daughter was still alive until the very end. The emotional torture she endured is unimaginable. The autopsy revealed that Connie had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen, and a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around her neck in multiple knots and semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, an incident raised questions about the work of police. An undercover policeman, Subramaniam Ravichandran, reported to his superiors that on the night of Connie's disappearance, he was on duty with his partner, patrolling the streets of Kuala Lumpur at night on their motorcycles. Both officers were dressed in civilian clothes. They noticed a car parked incorrectly, taking up half the road, and stopped to investigate if anyone was inside. Ravichandran approached the driver's door and saw a man behind the wheel with a woman in the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man lowered it partially, Ravichandran displayed his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver replied they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then requested to see their IDs. As the driver handed over the documents, she in the passenger seat made unusual hand gestures seemingly asking for help, but stopped whenever her assumed boyfriend looked at her. Noticing this, Ravichandran asked the driver to step out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming Ravichandran was not a police officer but a thief. He then raised the window and reached for the ignition. Realizing the car might drive off, Ravichandran drew his pistol and shot the right front wheel. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner pursued on a motorcycle but were unable to catch up, which is puzzling given the car had a flat tire. At the time, the Malaysian Police Department was in a state of disarray, which might explain why the officer didn't call for backup or report the incident. The car with a flat tire was a purple Proton Tiara, driven by 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, accompanied by a woman named Connie Alm. Although the police chase did not result in an immediate arrest, the officers managed to obtain documents from the driver. Tragically, Connie Alm was later found dead. It is possible that if the officer had acted differently during the encounter, the outcome might have been different. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only informed his superiors about the incident after Connie's body was discovered. The only positive outcome of that night was that the police had obtained documents that could help identify the suspect. Besides Kenny's family, many Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. Her death was a devastating loss for her husband, Brandon. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Ahmad Najib. They discovered that he didn't live at the address listed in his documents, but his name was genuine, providing multiple leads to track him down. The police searched for Ahmad Najib's name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support. They found a match, revealing that Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 siblings and had dropped out of school to work and support his family. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur, where he got married and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of Ahmad Najib's wife and her workplace, the police began surveillance. She worked at a metropolitan bank, and after her shift ended, undercover police officers followed her to determine her home address. Now that they knew where Ahmad Najib lived, the police had to ensure he was inside the house without alerting him. For 3 days, they monitored the house, but Ahmad Najib didn't appear. At one point, investigators doubted whether Ahmad Najib still lived with his family, but this was a hasty conclusion. On the fourth day of surveillance, at around 4 a.m., a cab pulled up to the house and Ahmad Najib stepped out. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly reached the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was suspected of kidnapping and killing Connie O.M. Those who knew him described Ahmad Najib as a devoted husband, a caring father of two, and an overall good person. However, investigators soon discovered that he may have been hiding a darker side. During the initial interrogation, Ahmad Najib remained calm and requested to speak only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. It wasn't until he was presented with evidence linking him to Connie Ong that Ahmad Najib began to deny any wrongdoing. His confidence seemed to wane as the evidence mounted. Investigators showed him 2 IDs that he had given to an officer on the night of Connie Ong's kidnapping. They also revealed that they had found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which DNA analysis would likely confirm to be Connie Ong's blood. After realizing the officers had solid evidence and were not bluffing, Ahmad Najib confessed to kidnapping and killing Connie O.M. Within 10 days of the kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, he was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. The police then conducted an investigative experiment where Ahmad Najib showed them all the locations he had been with Connie O.M. He provided a detailed account of how he forced her to be intimate with him multiple times, how he took her life, and how he attempted to dispose of her body. Evidence supporting his statements was found at all the locations he led the police to. The investigation began at the underground parking lot, where cameras captured footage of Ahmad Najib. According to his statement, he was waiting for his former boss, who had fired him and whom he sought revenge against. However, the claim about the former boss was never verified. Hiding in the darkness, he observed Connie Ong searching for something in her car and seized the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He forcefully pushed her into the car, issuing threats that if she attempted to escape or seek help, she would face dire consequences. Overwhelmed, Connie Ong became disoriented and obediently followed his instructions. Next, he took the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. After crashing through a barrier, he stopped in an industrial area where he began to harass Connie O.M. Just as this was happening, a plainclothes police officer approached the car. Ahmad Najib falsely told the officer that he didn't know he had taken the wrong person until the officer asked him and his victim for their identification. Even assuming Ahmad Najib had intended to kidnap his former boss, his guilt remains unchanged. Undoubtedly, his former boss would have suffered the same fate as Connie O.M. According to Ahmad Najib's account, he managed to evade the pursuing officer. Despite the officer possessing his documents, Ahmad Najib failed to consider releasing Connie O.M. Instead, he stopped the car on the street to replace a tire damaged by a bullet. A car containing a woman was parked at the spot where he had pulled over. He approached she and asked for a car jack, intending to change his tire. However, he noticed Kin Yong signaling to she, who then handed him the jack. He abandoned the idea of changing the tire and drove off immediately. Later, he stopped at a secluded area and used a knife to threaten Kin Yong, forcing her to engage in intimate acts with him. Afterwards, he drove to another district where he coerced Connie Ong into satisfying him again, with both of them in the back seat. Connie Ong pleaded for mercy, but he took her life instead. He then disposed of her body in a manhole near a highway, moved the car to another location, and left it there. 16 hours later, he returned to the scene with a gasoline canister in an attempt to conceal evidence of the crime. DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found in Connie Ong's body belonged to Ahmad Najib Ben Aris. His DNA was also discovered in the car, along with his fingerprints, providing further irrefutable proof of his guilt. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the blood on his jacket and jeans belonged to Connie Ong. The trial began on September 15, 2003, 3 months after Connie Ong's death. This high-profile case drew widespread attention from the Malaysian media and public. The trial attracted not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists, but also individuals seeking to boost their reputation, including numerous attorneys representing Ahmad Najib. Despite admitting guilt during the investigation, overwhelming evidence, including DNA proof, Ahmad Najib changed his stance after consulting 6 attorneys. At his first trial, he claimed his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge before whom Ahmad Najib confessed immediately after his arrest testified that there were no signs of physical abuse and Ahmad Najib appeared calm and relaxed. The attorneys then shifted their strategy, arguing that Connie OM was in the car with Ahmad Najib voluntarily. They suggested that Connie OM, a black belt in Taekwondo, should have attempted to escape if she were being held against her will. However, this attempt to blame Connie Ong was rejected, as people respond differently to critical situations. However, another claim surfaced, stating that Connie Ong had consensual intimacy with Ahmad Najib and that Connie Ong's death was caused by strangulation used to heighten the experience. Forensic experts disagreed with and rejected this account of what happened. The cloth around Connie's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Connie Ong had no intention of loosening it. Indeed, the cloth was so tight that the skin beneath was the only area on the body not affected by the fire. Furthermore, the cloth was a type used for cleaning plain windows, and given the defendant's job as a cabin cleaner, this linked him more closely to the crime. Additionally, the lawyers struggled to explain the stabbed wounds on Connie's body. At this point, Ahmad Najib's attorneys advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many questioned why Connie didn't escape the car when she had at least 2 chances to do so. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was convicted of all charges connected to the crime committed against Connie Ong. The evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad Najib received the maximum sentence under Malaysian law, 20 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of the cane for violating Connie Ong's sexual integrity, plus the death penalty for causing her death. In Malaysia, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, a method that differs significantly from the lethal injection used in some other countries such as the USA. Ahmad Najib's lawyers attempted to appeal the sentence twice but were unsuccessful both times. In 2010, Ahmad Najib petitioned the head of state to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment, maintaining his innocence. However, his plea for clemency was rejected. More than 13 years after Connie Ong's death, on September 23, 2016, Ahmad Najib's sentence was carried out. He was 40 years old at the time of his execution. Case of Ricky Neve. After 28 years, DNA from the clothes worn by 6-year-old Ricky Neve on the day of his tragic death matched with James Watson, who was a teenager at the time and had managed to evade justice for so long. Despite his mother's harsh way of raising her children, she seemed burdened with remorse and guilt for her actions, driving her to seek justice for her son's murder. Ricky's sisters were also determined to unravel the mystery and bring the killer to justice. But what truly happened in the household where Ricky and his sisters were raised? And what events occurred on the day of Ricky's murder, allowing the perpetrator to escape the law's grasp for so long? Ricky Lee Harvey, also known as Ricky Neve, was born on March 4, 1988, in the city of Peterborough, located in the county of Cambridgeshire in England, to Trevor Harvey and Ruth and Greg. Ruth's life had been marked by turmoil from an early age, with her being placed in foster care at the mere age of 2. Her younger brother, who was born blind at the tender age of 1, had already been placed in foster care. She endured a challenging journey through various foster homes before returning to her parents' care, forever changed by the abuse and insults she suffered while she was under foster care. Her empathy and affection dwindled with time, which was an observation made and reported by her mother to the authorities, a struggle that the mother had been dealing with too for quite some time. Tragedy struck again when Ruth's parents took their own lives as a suicide pact later on, leaving her to face the world alone once again. At 16, she met Trevor Harvey, settled in Cambridgeshire, and gave birth to their first child, Rebecca Maria Harvey, in 1986. They had their second child, Ricky, 2 years later. Their happiness was short-lived, as Trevor and Ruth separated when Ricky was only 3, but Ruth met Dean Neve not long after. They married and welcomed their first daughter into the world, and named her Rochelle Neve. The family later moved into the Wellender estate in Peterborough in 1992. Ruth decided to change Ricky's surname to match her new husband's, and he was now known as Ricky Neve. Sometime later, they welcomed another daughter and named her Sheridan Neve. They lived in Red Mile Walk, which was a part of the Welland estate that was well known for its association with crime and drug use. Unfortunately, the family's new home was riddled with challenges as Dean Neve was a notorious drug dealer, and Ruth had succumbed to addiction. She would even spend a lot on drugs to a point of neglecting her children's basic needs. Ricky and his sisters often wandered the estate without proper care, food, or clothing, drawing concern from neighbors who bravely reported the situation to social services. Ricky was the one who took care of his siblings when they were starved, as he would nick something from the shops and bring it to feed his siblings. He loved being clean, so he also made sure they were clean by running a bath for them. Dean was rarely at home, and Ruth often blamed Ricky for this, claiming that he was always away, since he hated his stepson. This made her start hating Ricky, as she would write to Dean during his prison stints, how she had hurt him by punching him and burning him with matches, and how she even wanted to kill him. She hated him more as she claimed that he would always laugh at her. The neighbors, often seeing the children outside, had no idea what really happened in that house. Ruth tormented and degraded the innocent children, frequently burning them with cigarettes and hurling insults at them. At one point, she even wrote "idiot" on their foreheads and forbade them from removing it. She would force them to stand for long periods of time while she smacked them on the head. She sent them to buy her drugs even after starving them. An allegation surfaced that she had been seen dangling Ricky by his ankles over a bridge. On one occasion, she forced Ricky to swallow liquid soap, and as he struggled to breathe, he managed to say, "I love you, Mommy." She would strangle the daughters to unconsciousness and even beat them with a hairbrush to the point of breaking it. They were even locked naked in rooms full of urine. The children tried to get the attention of their neighbors, which was often in vain as their cries were not heard by them. Ricky was placed on the at-risk register. After Ruth warned the child services repeatedly that she would kill him, he was taken into short-term care to give the mother some time. However, his files were mismanaged. Ruth, despite the clear evidence of the burns, cuts, and bruises on the children, would get away with it through her false explanations and excuses of accidents, and even blaming Ricky for being clumsy on his part. After 28 years, DNA from the clothes worn by 6-year-old Ricky Neve on the day he died tragically matched that of James Watson, the teenage killer who had managed to evade justice for a long time. Despite her cruelty in raising her children, Ricky's mother seemed burdened with remorse and guilt for her unforgiving actions, which drove her to seek her son's killer. Ricky's sisters were also determined to unravel the puzzling mystery and bring the killer to justice. But what really happened in the household, where Ricky and his sisters were raised, and what occurred on the day of Ricky's murder, allowing the perpetrator to escape the law's grasp for so long? On January of 1995, Ruth was suspected of murdering her own son during that very month. She faced charges of cruelty and neglect under the Children's Act and appeared at Peterborough Magistrates Court, accused of cruelty towards Ricky and one of her other children. In May of 1995, Ruth was charged with the murder of her son and offenses of cruelty to him and 2 of his sisters. Her trial began the following year in October 1996 at the Northampton Crown Court. Prosecutors told the jury that Ricky and his siblings were treated with cruelty and neglect, backed by witness statements. The prosecution concluded that Ricky was killed in a sacrifice by his mother, based on her numerous death threats to him. Ruth admitted to charges of neglect and cruelty, but denied any involvement in her son's murder. The case hinged on the testimony of a policeman who stated that he had not found the child's body during his search of the woods, where Ricky was eventually discovered on the night of his disappearance. The prosecution claimed the officer might have missed it in the dark. The jurors acquitted Ruth, convinced that she couldn't have moved Ricky's body since the police were with her at the said time. However, she was sentenced to 7 years in jail for the cruelty towards Ricky and his sisters, charges to which she had already confessed. Ruth was released in 2000, but the killer remained a mystery. In 2008, she met Gary Rogers, who married her. By then, Ricky's murder had become a cold case, and the police had given up. Rogers promised Ruth that he would give her all the support she needed to reopen the case and try to find the killer. In 2013, with the help of Cambridgeshire Times editor John Elworthy, they worked tirelessly to campaign for the reopening of the case and eventually succeeded. Rogers secured the original files from Ruth's former solicitor, a collection of 13 boxes with 8 to 12 ring binders filled with papers, and diligently read through each one. They met Paul Fullwood, the head of the local major crime unit at the time, who listened to the evidence they had and saw the reviews that the police had done beforehand. He thought the original hypothesis of Ruth being the killer was fanciful at best, and the more he looked at it, the more he became convinced that they needed to investigate further. Mr. Fullwood organized a cold case investigation with a new team made up of staff not involved in the original investigation. With fresh perspective, determination, and what they deemed as a stroke of luck, new evidence that would help solve the crime was found in the forensic archives. The crucial evidence was a piece of sellotape used to collect fibers from Ricky's clothes. Advancements in DNA technology in recent years have played a crucial role in solving cold cases, bringing justice for victims whose killers were thought to have gotten away, and providing closure to family and friends. An unidentified DNA was found on Ricky's clothes, and forensic tests matched it to none other than James Watson. At the time of Ricky's death, Watson was only 13 and lived at Woodgate's Children's Home in Cambridgeshire, 20 miles away from Peterborough. He had moved there from foster care in March of 1994. On November 25, 1994, 3 days before Ricky's murder, Watson had asked his mother about a young child found dead in the woods. His mother, having no clue what he was talking about, brushed off the conversation, assuring him that nobody had heard of such a thing happening. Little did she know that he would be the one behind such an atrocity just 3 days later. Watson was questioned by the police after several witnesses claimed to have seen them together on that fateful day, but he vehemently denied it, stating he was nowhere near Ricky and that he only caught a glimpse of him. The mother also said nothing about the conversation they had, just some days prior, about the made-up scenario of the young child in the woods that would materialize in less than a week with an almost similar description to what had actually happened. Police did not further challenge him, perhaps due to ignorance or their preference for the idea of Ruth being the killer and not some disturbed teenager. They probably didn't know he was disturbed until later. Watson was of course searched for and arrested in April 2016 in connection with Ricky's murder. By then, he was already a serial offender with a criminal record that included stealing cars and an arson attack. At a British transport police station back in 2008, questioned by the new investigation team about his DNA ending up on Ricky's clothes, Watson changed the story he had initially given to the police. He now said that he might have lifted Ricky to help him see over a fence. The statement started getting him into further trouble. The police tested his claim and found footage from 1994 showing the estate being redeveloped. They discovered that the fence was not built when Ricky Neve was still there, as it was constructed after he was already murdered. The investigators were therefore able to prove that Watson was not only a fantasist, but also a huge liar. However, this was still not enough to secure his conviction, so they started to pull other pieces of evidence together. It was not long until evidence was found that he had inappropriately touched a 5-year-old child when he was around 11 or 12, and his ex-girlfriend had also complained about him strangling her during sex. 2 teachers also revealed how he had become obsessed with Ricky's murder case, showing an unnatural level of interest in it, and even photocopying the front page of the Peterborough Evening Telegraph, which covered the case. More disturbing behavior had also been noted at the children's home where he lived, including him pleasing himself over pictures of young boys in underwear. He also kept a dead pheasant in his room, and it was claimed that he had on one occasion killed a bird and spread its wings in a sinister reconstruction of Ricky's murder. After being released on police bail, he left the UK 3 months later in a motorhome with another bail hostel resident. He traveled to Rotterdam, then France, and crossed the Pyrenees into Portugal. From France, he had reached out to his sister Claire Perna, admitting that he was in serious trouble and that he had made a massive mistake. The next time he called, he reiterated that he was in deeper trouble and urgently needed to return to the UK. He had shamelessly posted pictures of himself on social media, enjoying the beaches, bragging about how he got out of the country. Seeing the pictures of Watson abroad, which were extensively covered in the media, angered Ricky's family. They knew that since he had escaped the country even after his passport had been taken, he was definitely guilty of the act. Watson was eventually rearrested near the British Embassy in Lisbon and extradited back to Britain. He was found guilty of murder by a majority of the Old Bailey jury. Previously, the court heard how Watson's sexual interest in younger boys was known to police, who had interviewed him over an allegation that he molested a 5-year-old back in 1993. The disturbing behavior was noted at Watson's children's home, and the prosecution claimed it was no coincidence that 3 days before the murder, Watson was the source of a bogus radio report about a 2-year-old boy being strangled. Immediately after Ricky's murder in identical circumstances, Watson obsessed over newspaper coverage of the killing, copying front-page stories at school. The jurors heard that key evidence in the case against Watson included Ricky's last meal of Weetabix taken in the morning, which fixed his time of death at around noon when he was seen playing with Watson. It meant that Ricky was killed shortly after heading to the woods with Watson where he used to play. Watson's legal team had accused Ricky's mother, but she denied any involvement. Ricky's muddy Clark shoes also indicated his walk into the woods was a one-way trip and not a case of being murdered by the mother and the body being dragged into the forest, therefore ruling out that accusation. After a trial at London's Old Bailey that took place from January 18th to April 21st, 2022, James Watson, at the age of 41, was found guilty of Ricky Neve's murder. On June 24th, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 15 years by Mrs. Justice McGowan. The judge considered Watson's age at the time of Ricky's death as a significant factor in determining the sentence. In June 2023, Watson was granted permission to appeal his conviction. His lawyer argued before the Court of Appeal that Watson was not able to get a fair trial because too much of the evidence from which the killer's DNA could have been recovered was lost or destroyed in the intervening years. This case could have been solved much earlier if the official police records of 6 reported sexual assaults on children in the Wellender state in the 3-year period before Ricky's murder had been thoroughly investigated. If the reports had been followed up, the allegation on his record of touching a 5-year-old could have been a crucial lead to the police in finding the perpetrator. These failures in the investigation add to the list of the many shortcomings in this case. The verdict was a triumph for Ricky's sisters, who had never thought they would see justice for their beloved brother. With the killer finally caught, the family found a sense of closure, allowing them to move forward with their lives, while cherishing the memory of the little boy Ricky was back in 1994. Ricky Neve will forever be remembered as a loving and caring brother, and a brave and kind-hearted boy. Despite facing challenges at a young age, he showed remarkable courage and love and always protected his sisters. He deserved a life brimming with joy, but tragically he endured cruelty, neglect, and the ultimate horror of murder. If he had been given the love and affection he deserved, this heart-wrenching tragedy might never have occurred in the first place.